It's half term this week. And of course that means kids at home. And I know from other work that I have done as a journalist how difficult it is for some families to feed their kids, particularly if they're on a low income, for 3 meals a day at home. And actually being able to provide a free school meal actually takes the weight off family budgets. And for some children, I'm sorry to say, in this country, that meal they get at lunchtime, if it is free and supplied by the school, particularly in primary school, may well be the only warm meal that they get in the day. It's interesting to learn that Scotland is coming under renewed pressure to fund universal free school meals for secondary school pupils. And that's to combat hunger. I think there are also moves afoot, similar sorts of calls in Northern Ireland. I heard an absolutely fascinating interview in which somebody set out how in England you qualify for a free school meal. And you have to be considered on a very low income. And that very low income is £7,000 excluding benefits. So if your household income is £7,000 or less, excluding benefits, your children will have access to free school meals. And it suddenly struck me, that is an incredibly high bar. If you are someone who is earning £20,000 and you have to support 2 or 3 kids in this country, I don't understand why you wouldn't qualify for your kids to get a free school meal. And as I understand it, food poverty action groups feel the same way. Stephanie Slater is founder and chief executive of School Food Matter, a charity that works to improve children's access to healthy, sustainable food during their time at school. Stephanie, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Can we start with you just setting out what the situation is with free school meals? Who gets them in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland? How do you qualify for them? And how many kids is that?
So it's a very varied picture. You pointed out in your introduction there that there's difference between the 4 nations. So there's a couple of things to unpick here. First of all, in England, every infant school child gets a free school meal. So that was a policy brought in 2014 with the coalition government and was absolutely welcomed with great applause and an amazing job by our catering teams across the country to make that happen.
Okay. So universal free school meals for every primary school child in England?
Infant child. That's the important issue. So we're talking from children 4 to 7. So that is a policy in England.
Right.
Now, we know that in the 4 nations, Wales is rolling out free school meals for all primary children from September 24. Scotland is looking at this policy too. Northern Ireland has a different eligibility threshold. So whereas you mentioned in your intro, in England it's £7,400, excluding benefits. In Northern Ireland it's £14,000. So that's a lot healthier.
Yeah.
In Northern Ireland. So there's a few things that need to happen. The first thing that needs to happen is auto-enrolment, whereby government departments talk to each other, so it's not put on the parent to identify themselves as needing a free or being eligible for a free school meal.
Okay, so at the moment, just to be clear, Stephanie, if you're a parent and you're struggling, you have to communicate with the school directly and say, I'm struggling here, this is how much I'm earning, is my child eligible? Is that right?
That's right. That's right. You have to register for free school meals, so you have to fill in a form. And we think this is wrong because the government holds the data, DWP holds the data on who is entitled, but they don't share with the Department for Education. And the Local Government Association has come out in support of automatic enrolment because we don't want paperwork to get in the way of a child receiving good nutrition at school.
Yeah.
From a low-income family. So that's the first thing that needs to happen.
So removing the hurdles is what you're saying?
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. And another key thing, which you pointed out, that threshold of £7,400 is so low. And obviously there have been calls for an extension to eligibility. So you'll have heard of the National Food Strategy.
Yes.
And you'll certainly have heard of Marcus Rashford. Yes. Obviously, they have been calling for an extension to eligibility now for 2 years. So when the part one of the strategy came out during lockdown, which was an emergency chapter to the National Food Strategy, they were saying that every family on universal credit should be entitled to a free school meal. That seemed very simplistic and a straightforward way of managing this. Next, they fine-tuned the figures and talked about the threshold being £20,000. Again, a massive lift from the £7,400. So this hasn't happened yet, and we think it's really, really important because right now, as you pointed out, cost of living crisis, food prices going to the roof, fuel prices going to the roof. For a lot of families, as you say, this is the only hot meal their children get in a day. So we want to see more children benefiting from this. And we think that extension would be a great start, but ultimately, as you've mentioned, universal primary meals. Yeah. That would be such a great commitment to children's health.
And I want to dig into this with you. I've only got a minute or so. It strikes me that, of course, you can lower the barriers to application. Of course, you can try and see if more people may qualify for free school, or parents may get their kids qualified for free school meals dependent on income. Why have we moved away from just providing free school meals for primary-age children? And I understand there's a cost issue. I'm going to ask you how much that would be if you were to, for example, cost it for the whole of England. But at a time that we are constantly talking about poor nutrition for children, obesity in this country, the cost of living crisis, trying to find ways of levelling the playing field for all children, right? So they start equal, particularly in education. Why on earth is somebody not reinvesting in the idea of universal free school meals for all primary age children in the 4 nations?
It's a really, really good question, and we're campaigning very hard on this. And we sort of see, if you like, the opportunity, I guess, is the next general election. And we're obviously talking to anybody that will listen to us right now about this very matter. It's the most fair way of making sure children have what we describe as a nutritional safety net.
How much would it cost in England, for example? I've only got a few seconds left with you.
I guess you were going to ask me that. We're getting some research done now just to have a look at those figures so that we can go to government with a really clear picture. But we're unpicking that right now because we need to have the figures in front of us. But you have to balance it against the cost of means testing children, the administration that goes with that, the stigma attached with self-identity,
or particularly at primary school age, well, we know that that's when children's neural pathways are being laid, and actually nutrition is absolutely critical. It is critical to a child's development. I feel very strongly about this, as you can imagine. Can I tell you a very, very quick story?
Yes, please.
I'm going to get very told off because we're going to take one more call, but let me tell you this. So I remember very distinctly going to high school, and in primary school, we did all have packed lunches, but there was something particular about my high school. I suddenly jumped to an absolutely gigantic state comprehensive school, and lots of the friends that I went to school with at junior school ended up getting separated off and going into the free school meals line. And I can tell you, they used to put the kids on free school meals on one side of the corridor, and we would be on the other side, and my parents would pay a supplement for a hot meal at school. And that image of my friends, the kids I grew up with in primary school, being separated off and put in a separate queue and stigmatised because they could not afford the supplement for a free school meal, has never left me, and I will never, ever, I think, stop campaigning for this. Thank you very much indeed, Stephanie Slater, from the founder and chief executive of School Food Matters.